Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another Property Quorum. I'm here joined with Howard of the board, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, and of course, the main man himself, Hamish McLay, recently crowned, I should mention, of Search and Convey. More about that later. But what I wanted to do is just make sure that everyone is ready to rock, because we do have a special guest. And considering that the topic of today is common home buying mistakes, I should say, I think this person is particularly apt. Wendy Gibson of course, the First Time Buyers Club. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm delighted you are here. And what I would say is this topic, hopefully, will get people thinking and musing and potentially querying what they're doing or how they're thinking about it. So, first of all, I'm going to throw Wendy straight under the bus without further ado and say, please tell us, what is the First Time Buyers Club?
Right. Well, I've been in the property industry for just under 20 years doing property transactions. And over those years, I have helped quite a few colleagues, friends, etc., get on the property ladder. When I bought my first home, I found it quite a stressful process to go through. And I guess that's what really planted the seed about helping people get on the property ladder. So knowing the complexities and how much more difficult it has become from a red tape point of view, from a finance point of view, from a market point of view, for first-time buyers to get on the property ladder, that is why I set up the First-Time Buyers Club, to help coach and advise first-time buyers through the process.
A very valid and apt cause. I'm going to go straight to Juliet. Juliet, just how hard is it these days for a first-time buyer to do it if they don't have bank of nana and granddad, bank of mum and dad, or some large deposition into our account from places unknown?
Yeah, just very, very difficult. I mean, just proving that you've got a credit history or the ability to fund the mortgage in the long term, those things present difficulties to a first-time buyer. You might also have, issues in terms of them understanding the process, which is why it's so essential that people like Wendy are on, provide these services, because often if you get information from someone who's been through it before and able to give you that hand-holding and able to say, look, this is a potential pitfall, then, you can steer them clear. It's not just about sort of getting up one day and deciding, yeah, it's all great to get on the property ladder. You've got so many people who have gotten themselves, for example, in shared ownerships, and they don't even understand that they only own a share of the lease. And
Yes.
So sometimes there's a disparity in terms of what you're actually getting and what the process entails. So with someone like Wendy, where she enables people in terms of arming them with the information on process and, the difficulties for first-time buyers, that's really essential. There's so much information as well, Gareth, on the internet that some of it is incorrect, some of it is out of date, and it's so essential that you go to the right person, to guide you, because you might be reading out of date information that can steer you the wrong way. So it may have been true 10 years ago, but it's no longer applicable.
I thought with the constant rises in valuations, some of them sky high, that it's become almost impossible unless you have some support. So frankly, I'm glad that people like Wendy exist, because they make it still applicable that we can talk about such a thing. Chris, I was under the impression that your natural combatants, duelists, if you like, are often first-time buyers. Possibly when it all falls through for them, that you can whisk in like the knight on the white charger to help them out.
Not to help out the first-time buyers, but I'd say first-time buyers are definitely a competition for me, because it's an emotive decision. I think the best advice, or one of the points I can give to the first-time buyers, is know what you're prepared to pay for it based on market value. So do a little bit of research to understand what the real market values of the property is that you're you're looking to negotiate on. There's two real reasons behind that. Firstly is that the estate agent, if you don't know what the market values are, will try and push you and try and extract a higher offer out of you than the property is potentially worth. And the other angle of that is that when the mortgage valuer goes in and could potentially downvalue the property, you're then left in a bit of a position that you either have to back out or find the rest of the funds for the deposit. So yeah, know what the property is worth before you go into negotiation.
Know what the property is worth. It's absolutely true. Hamish, just how much work do you get through working with first-time buyers? Is it dropping off, or is it still increasing?
Well, it's fairly steady, because I mean, I think we've actually sort of found, and one or two of the experts we've had speaking with us have shown we've got a very steady market at this particular sort of moment in time. However, I mean, one of the things that did actually sort of come to me is not just first-time buyers who have this particular sort of challenge, because people don't buy properties unless they're investing, unless they're working directly with somebody like Chris. They're not necessarily doing it all the time. It could be 7, 8, 10 years before they do it again. So everything changes so much, and somebody like Wendy can actually keep them in the right sort of direction. And what we've actually sort of found, we've spoken about this before, we've got some great experts here in the particular sort of team. We've got Juliet here, who knows lots of the legal side of things. We know Chris, who knows types of properties and the way to put people in that direction. However, if you've got the guide in the background to actually point you in the direction of somebody like Chris, in the direction of somebody like Juliet, and show you all the other steps, and this is the sort of thing, of course, that Wendy can actually sort of do. So we say first-time buyers, they might be first-time investors. There could be all sorts of different aspects to it, but it's knowing that somebody to fall back, that, and as Juliet sort of mentioned there, just having somebody to guide you through that particular sort of process, even though you might have done it once before, even though you might even have been able to do it twice before, you don't necessarily know what the change has been since you last time did it last time 3 years ago. We know what the government are like for trying to change the law around. So you need that guy with the up-to-date knowledge.
The way I think of it is that the rules and the restrictions that are out there, every so often the government or one of its bodies takes them like a bunch of juggling balls and throws them up in the air and hopes that some of them land. Wendy, is it harder these days for first-time buyers? I mean, my perception is, I mean, I've owned my own property for a good while, but there are a lot of people out there for whom this is an entire mystery. And it used to be relatively easy. I mean, albeit that you had to jump through a few hoops to get on the ladder. These days, it seems like a flipping nightmare.
It is a nightmare, and the perception is that it is a lot harder these days than it used to be in the past, not just because of the higher percentages of mortgage that somebody needs to apply for versus whatever their earnings are, but equally there's a lot more regulation nowadays. You know, up until not that long ago, you could just walk into an estate agent, ask to have a look at properties, put an offer down, and that be it. Now you've got to complete anti-money laundering checks 3 times over, for example, which is something that catches quite a lot of first-time buyers by surprise, because they don't expect that at all. They might expect that from the lender, but they don't expect that from the solicitors as well as the estate agents, for example. So there's so many more
coming at them from all directions.
Yeah. So many more hoops to have to jump through. Equally, mortgage lenders themselves, they've tightened quite a lot in terms of the criteria, the scrutiny that a lot of their security has to be placed under. So nowadays, there's far more emphasis at looking at the title deed, looking at any little complexities that might arise from the title of the property, for example, as well as, you know, just general legislation. One thing that hasn't helped first-time buyers is the restriction on, well, all the affordability tests that lenders have to undertake to make sure that a borrower can actually afford the mortgage payments. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that those affordability checks are a bad thing, because they've definitely saved us during the COVID, where a lot of people have been able to continue to afford their mortgages, but it does stunt and limit the amount of first-time buyers can actually borrow, and hence then limit what options they have in the market.
I was under the impression, having spoken to Chris at length recently, that there are perhaps interesting ways in which you could twist this to make what would previously have been wholly unaffordable property at least affordable, perhaps through shared ownership or otherwise. I realise, as Juliet has said, that means it's not really yours, but it does mean that you get on the ladder, even in some small part. Are those the sort of tools that you use, or there are other tricks that you have up your extensive sleeves?
There are all sorts of tricks, and I can relate in particularly about the shared ownership route, because that was the route that I took when I moved to the UK. I didn't have a bank of mum and dad to help provide me with a deposit, and I hadn't actually been in the UK for very long. So I ended up applying and was luckily accepted to purchase a shared ownership property. So that was my route to getting on the property ladder. And yes, I look at all of those slightly out of the wayside paths. I leave no stone unturned for first-time buyers to provide them with as many options as they can, to try and empower them, rather than just leave it to chance, leave it to whatever's listed on the market. I encourage first-time buyers to actually be a bit more proactive in trying to find their homes and look at something that's slightly more out of the ordinary, to anything to help them get on the property ladder.
Juliet, appears to me, and I may have got this entirely wrong, some people really overextend themselves, especially in the current marketplace, where it's the asking prices are eye-watering at the least. Surely we should be worried about that sort of thing. We should protect these people from putting themselves in positions that, let's face it, once signed up, they could then lose their arguably largest asset.
Absolutely. And there's also that risk of homelessness. So let's not forget, I mean, Chris used that word emotive. When you have first-time buyers and they're buying a property to live in, so that, we're not looking at the investors here. We're looking at people who are buying a home to live in, whether it's in the long term or not. They are emotionally invested in this, and that sometimes comes in. And the reality is, these lenders are regulated. They're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, and they're meant to be seen as responsible lenders. So what they will do in terms of tightening up the criteria is they don't want the reputation of having to repossess someone's home and making them homeless. So the criteria has been tightened up with a view to protecting themselves. There was a time, I think in 2008, when you could just go in with your payslip, and, the banks would issue an offer and it was all, done and dusted. And so the regulation has come in to protect both sets of parties. Lawyers aren't necessarily, when it gets to the legals and I see a mortgage offer, for argument's sake, if I'm acting for a borrower, I don't advise them on how fit for purpose this mortgage offer is. That that's regulated authority and a regulated territory, and this is why getting a good broker who's not just after a commission, not just after a fee, is important, because that broker should steer you right and should look at long-term ability to pay. I mean, what happens if you've lost your job? What happens if you've gotten sick and you're in an accident? Have you got some sort of insurance policy to protect those payments, to ensure that you're not made homeless? I remember my first case, my background's mortgage litigation, and I was at court acting for a lender, going into repossession case to repossess someone's home because they hadn't made their payments. They came in with their children to court. And of course, any human, irrespective of you being, you acting for the lender, your heart's breaking. And I remember going before a judge, and this judge said to me, she's got to take her sort of, that personality hat off in terms of being a mother, etc. and look at this from a sort of an objective perspective. And if she were in that position where she hadn't made her mortgage payments for a period of time, she would lose her home. So, ultimately, it's all good and well to have this key to this house, but think of it in the long term, just like getting a shared ownership. The reality is, hold on to that if that's something you can afford initially. And as your finances increase, staircase and buy more and more shares to that shared ownership. And then perhaps the equity in that increases. And then you can afford something more because you can sell this and buy something else. And you've got that pot of money that you could potentially use for a deposit. So be responsible, do your research, and know you're going to ask those questions. When the emotion comes in, it's really difficult to make objective decisions, but it's essential here when investing, when buying property, which is the biggest investment that you will be making, to not have that emotion be the decision, the factor that helps you make that decision.
Hamish, it seems that we want emotionally engaged mortgage brokers. I never thought the two things would ever be in the same sentence.
Well, actually, we're very fortunate because over the last sort of few weeks, few months, we've actually had a couple of very sensitive mortgage brokers who really sort of go out of their way to make sure they're looking at that particular sort of deal. And I think that's one of the great advantages of having sort of somebody like Wendy in the background, because we know when we look at from the legal perspective, we've got the legal side of things, and Chris as well on the investment side of it. You've got people sort of like that who, if you like, Chris is always going to advise somebody, that's not a particularly good route for you, this might be a better idea. And it was quite interesting. I think somebody who had experience, they bought their own property and they were going into their first own, that they were going into, it was buy to let sort of idea, and I think it might have been multiple occupation. They came to me for some advice, and really the sort of thing, so they're not exactly a first time buyer, they're first time investor, and of course they need to speak to somebody like Chris, but they need somebody there in the background like Wendy to be able, because she could give them much more advice than I can say, well, this is a good idea, speak to, but basically somebody like Wendy can actually give the various sort of routes through, and obviously she will know the right sort of people. She will be able to guide. You've got the right mortgage broker, you've got the right developer, you've got the right but all these different sort of things if you've got somebody looking after your interest. But yes, the emotional side is important, and I think, although we're sort of trying to suggest, it's just that people do get emotional about their investments, not just their first time sort of purchase. I mean, Chris will allude to this anyway, but certainly first time buyers have this sort of habit of, if you like, pulling the old heart, what do I do type touch, I've lost my way. But the getting the right people, we speak about this just about every week, I think. You speak to the right people about what.
Well, talking of the right people, Mr. Hamish McLay, I believe someone not so far away to this group has recently become elected as chairman of IPSA. So congratulations. I believe that would be you, sir.
Oh, yes, indeed.
So tell me, how does IPSA factor into all of this shenanigans?
Well, what IPSA actually said is it was originally established as the Institute of Personal Search Agents, but it's actually been expanded. Institute doesn't sound so good these days, so it's the Association of Independent Property Search Agents. So the group of which I'm chairman is responsible for, if you like, formulating or orchestrating the availability of local authority searches from anywhere in England and Wales. And we have a sort of team, and we all work as a particular sort of team. So if somebody approaches me and says, oh, I've got this property that I need to purchase up in the Wirral, where Chris is based, for example, I know somebody who's actually, there is somebody within the IPSA organisation who's an independent search agent. They have the local knowledge to go and do the work there, which is so vitally important. And it just so happened, I've been part of the organisation for some years, I've been on the board, and with the resignation, I've got that sort of good, I've got into that sort of good position, which makes it all the more important, because what I'm trying to do as a chairman is to try and make sure for our members that they are working with the right sort of teams as well, which is where I can actually recommend the likes of sort of Wendy, the likes of Chris, the likes of sort of Juliet, when they're involved in those particular sort of transactions. So it gives me an interesting situation. Whereas the thing is, although I always have been doing this, I'm looking after the interests of other people all the more than I was in the first place.
So does that make you chief organ grinder? Is that what we're hearing here?
Well, yes, I mean, the first meeting comes up. I've got a board meeting tomorrow. Then the first meeting with Land Registry comes up on.
Watch this space. All right, look, what I'd like to do is, before we wind this thing up, let's quickly go around the room, and I'm going to end on the inimitable Wendy Gibson, really just for a short, quick piece of advice for those hungry first-time buyers out there who feel the world's against them. Hamish, a quick one-liner from you.
Well, all I can actually say, listen to the experts, because the experts are the people that can guide you. I can sort of help out and do the background work, but it's the people at the front line. And if you want the guide right the way through the whole thing, you really need somebody like Wendy there, because she will make sure that you're speaking to the right legal person. You're speaking to the right, the right sort of whether you want to develop it, because you might be wanting to do something with that property. So, but she will check it out for you. And that to me, I mean, it's great knowing something like there is, as Juliet mentioned earlier as well. Having something like that in the background is great.
So talking of the right legal person, Juliet, one line from you.
Understand the process, before, during, and after. What are the consequences, and who are the parties involved in each stage of the process? Understand the purchase process is my advice.
Yes, for goodness sake, don't go in blind. Chris, a line of support from you, sir.
Don't get pushed around by the estate agents. They don't work for you. They don't represent your interests. They work for the vendor. So yeah, know what the value of the
that's a common mistake, isn't it? People forget they don't work for you.
Yeah, know what the value of the property is worth, even in factoring in the cost of works.
And finally, Wendy, if you could give us one extra line of advice. You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. I'm going to reiterate what Juliet said and focus on the process. One of the biggest mistakes that buyers make is doing things in the wrong order. They first decide that they want to buy a house, and then initially they're jumping straight onto the listing platforms, booking viewings, etc., without actually even knowing how much they can afford. So you've got to get your finances in order first. Then you've got to make sure you've got your legal team set up right. So when you've put your offer in, you can get your solicitors already instructed straight away, and then only start looking at properties once you know what your budget is.
So I just want to thank once again our stalwart members, Hamish, McLay of South Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, and of course Chris Gilsenan of Root Home. And thank you so much for attending Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club. I do hope you come back again and visit. Remember, guys, we are here every week. Shameless plug, 10 o'clock. Please do come along. Also, we are now running a series with Hamish McLay on Fridays called Property Matters. So do look out for that. You'll see some advertising here on LinkedIn. But until next time, I wish all of you safe and sensible property searching and buying, and of course, great mental health. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.